Okay, I sent you a PowerPoint again about the deaf cultures class. Did you all receive that? You received the PowerPoint? Okay.
Everybody's saying yes.
Yes, okay. So um, in the PowerPoint, there are 30 slides, and you will be tested on slides up through 22. It sounds like a lot, but in general, you can look at the PowerPoint when you're answering the question. I think we'll do it a similar way to what we did last time, in that you will have 3 different parts for the test, and you do each part separately, and we'll put them all together. And hopefully there won't be any mistakes so on the test that I make. So hopefully we can do this next Thursday. I think this will give you time to study. Okay. Now, I also sent you a list of questions to study for the midterm, and I'm going to do some review now. Okay, so if you open the PowerPoint, how to prepare the tests on introduction, not PowerPoint, Word file, how to prepare for the test on introduction to deaf cultures and identities. Now I'm going to put this on screen share just for a second so you can see what I'm talking about to make sure. Okay, can you see the screen share?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So for now, I'll keep the screen share on. And we'll see how it works. Okay. So you should be prepared to answer questions related to the following areas, geographic areas: Martha's Vineyard Island, Providence Island, Reno Island, Bancor Village, Otomorobe Village. And then you should also be prepared to answer questions about urban areas in the United States, Colombia, where Providence Island is located, is governed by, and the Solomon Islands, which is related to Reno Island, and Thailand, which is related to Bangkok, and Vietnam and Manila and the Philippines. Manila and the Philippines, the same thing, but I may ask some questions about Manila and some questions about the Philippines. And your answers to Thailand, Vietnam, Manila, and the Philippines should be identical. So those areas are the same. So if I ask you one question about Thailand and the same question about Vietnam, your answer should be the same. Okay? If I ask you some questions about the islands, or Otomorobe Village or Bancor Village, then your answers should be the same for those groups of people, those areas, but they should be different than, so for example, if I ask you about Martha's Vineyard, your answer should be similar to Providence Island. But if I ask you about Martha's Vineyard and then ask you about the United States, your answers will be different. Okay? So some of you may think, oh, I have so much to memorize. Look at all these places. But really, you only have 2 kinds of places: island places or small villages and urban areas. Does that make any sense? Nobody's saying anything. Okay, let's try the first question. Is there a sign language in Martha's Vineyard Island? Yes or no?
Steve said yes.
Yes.
Also Kyla.
In all of those,
Survey, sorry. Miami is saying you keep on freezing survey. You want to do the interpretation.
okay. So if I ask you, is there a sign language on, or was there a sign language on Martha's Vineyard in the past? Yes. Is there a sign language in Thailand? Yes. Is there a sign language in Vietnam? Yes. Is there a sign language in Bangkok Village? Yes. All of those places have sign languages because all of those places have deaf people. However, suppose I ask you, do most hearing people sign on Providence Island? Yes or no? Yes. Most people in the island communities, most deaf people will sign. In Manila, most deaf people will sign. In Vietnam, most deaf people will sign. What about hearing people? In Manila, in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Thailand, do most hearing people sign? No. You go out on the street and you meet a hearing person, are they going to sign with you? No. But on Martha's Vineyard, Providence, well, earlier in Martha's Vineyard, Providence Island, Rennell Island, Bangkor, Atamorobe, if you go out on the street and you're deaf, you will meet hearing people who know sign language. Most hearing people know sign language in those island communities. Okay, do you remember this or is it strange to you?
Yes, so I remember, sir.
Okay,
Yami and
okay. Okay,
Tanya.
now I may ask you, I probably won't ask you, well, I'll either ask you one of two questions. What is the number of deaf people
Sir, we're
yes,
just having a request. Could we go back to the big screen so we can see the interpreter better?
okay, sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, stopping to share. Okay. Can you see better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my file. Okay, so I may ask you if you can watch the PowerPoint, then I may ask you about numbers. But if you can't get access to the PowerPoint, I won't ask you about questions related to numbers of deaf people. So, but we can ask the question, and you should be able to answer it without looking at the PowerPoint. Do deaf people have a separate social identity from hearing people on Providence Island?
No one's answering.
Mm-hmm.
Yami said Rennell.
Rennell Island, what? Have separate social identity?
They're shaking their head. Yami shaking her head.
Okay, so no separate social identity in Rennell Island. What about Providence Island? No, all the island small communities are the same. No separate social identity, no separate deaf community, no separate deaf culture. Why? because all the hearing people sign,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I'm looking at faces and they look questioning, so I don't know if
Yes.
you're understanding or not.
Yeah, me saying it's been a long time. It's been a while since we've talked about this.
Yeah, but the principle is that island communities and small fishing communities and small agricultural communities are different from urban communities. That shouldn't be difficult to remember. So you're looking at this and you're saying, I don't remember Providence Island. You don't have to, because all the islands function the same way. And you don't have to remember about Vietnam versus Thailand versus Philippines in the urban areas. They all are the same. You're making this more difficult than it is. Okay? Now, if you think you can't do the test next week, you can have 2 or 3 weeks to study, but it's really not so difficult. So let's go on to the next set of questions. Is there a deaf community in the area? How about Providence Island and Bangkor Village? Is there a deaf community where deaf people have a different social identity and different language from the hearing people?
Patrick saying maybe.
No. Why would deaf people form a separate community? Hearing people all use the same language that deaf people use. So deaf people are integrated into the society. What about Manila? Is there a separate deaf community from hearing people?
Yeah, me saying you mean now, sir? Now?
Yeah, now.
So yes, yeah, me saying yes. Deaf and hearing
There's a separate
communities are
community,
separate.
right, right. But on Providence Island now, there's not a separate community. Right? Okay. So again, group all of the island and small villages together, group all of the urban areas together. You only have 2 different kinds of societies. Okay? All right.
Okay, sir.
Is there a deaf culture in Manila? So you're deaf? Do you have your own cultural rules?
Yes, sir. Peeps is saying
Yes.
yes.
You prefer using sign language. You don't prefer using hearing aid. You don't prefer to communicate by speaking. You prefer to communicate through signing. Many of you want to marry deaf people. And many of you have don't mind having deaf children, or have deaf children and don't mind. These are cultural differences with the hearing community. Okay. So you have to have a separate community to have a separate culture. You have to have a separate identity to have a community. So on Providence Island, for example, there's a sign language, but deaf people don't have a different identity from hearing people. They don't form a separate community, and they don't have a deaf culture. Okay. Same in Bangkok, same in all the island and villages. Yes, what Yami's saying is correct. Yami, say it again, please.
So there is no separate identity with the hearing people. They're
Right, right.
one integrate with each other in one society.
Right. Now, in Bangkok village, it's not very far from a deaf school, but many of the deaf people and a deaf club, but many of the deaf people in Bangkok didn't want to go to the school because it used a different sign language from the village, and they didn't want to go associate with the deaf people in the city because they used a separate sign language. They said, why should we go separate from our community? Because our community uses our language. Okay? So if you just get this idea in mind, you shouldn't have any trouble answering any questions, any of those questions. Now you can get confused and answer the question wrong, but in general, if you're thinking island communities, sign language, but no separate identity, no separate community, no separate culture. And the big urban areas, sign language, but separate identity, separate community, and separate culture.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
So think about Manila. What happens in Manila? And that's going to be true for any urban areas. And then the islands are going to be totally the opposite. Okay, so then you also need to discuss the relationship between sign languages, deaf communities, deaf identities, and deaf cultures. Okay, so if there is a sign language, do you have to have a separate deaf community? Yes or no?
Men saying yes.
So Providence Island has a separate deaf community?
He's just saying no, no.
No.
He's saying no.
Right, so you can have a sign language, but you don't necessarily have to have a deaf community. Okay, so Providence Island is that way, has a sign language, but no deaf community. Okay, but if you have a deaf community and a deaf culture, do you have to have a sign language?
He's just saying yes.
Yes, right. Because how do deaf people communicate in deaf culture, in a deaf community? They communicate through sign language. So I want you to think about this, and maybe Tuesday we'll have a pop quiz. Well, not grade it, but we'll ask some of these questions and see if you can answer them by Tuesday. Okay, before class. Okay, and then if you don't, then we can consider postponing the test until you fully understand that. Okay. Now, another thing you need to know is where is the area located? So you'll have some choices like Martha's Vineyard. Is it located near North America, Central America, Asia, Europe? Which one? Well, you can look on your
Yeah, I'm saying
handout
South
if you don't
America,
remember.
US, the South of America and
Yeah, it would be Central
US.
America in that case, yeah. I mean, I will give you answers like North America versus Central America, and you would pick Central America. Central America is the little piece of land that connects North and South America. So what I want you to do is take some time, like you see this kind of, so this is North America up at the top, and then South America at the bottom, and then the thumbs are Central America. Okay, you have maps showing where each place is. Okay, so I will also give you some quizzes on Tuesday about that. So Providence Island is located near Central America. And what about Bangkok? Is it located near America, Africa, Asia, or Europe? Asia.
Asia.
Asia, right. Bangkok is in Thailand. Thailand is in Asia. So you may not be able to find that directly on the handouts, but if you think when you're analyzing the handouts, oh, Bangkok is in Thailand, Thailand is in Asia, you can logically think it out. Okay? Not just memorizing. Okay? So I think what I want you to do is go through some of these questions and see if you can answer the questions. So for example, let's go back. All right, so here are the communities, okay? I'm gonna go back to screen sharing so you can see the communities, okay? All right. Here, I don't know if you can see my cursor going around and around. Here are the communities. Can you see the cursor? Can you see the movement or only see the? Okay. And then use your PowerPoints to make the answer to these, and then be able to answer each of the 8 questions related to each place. And if you're not sure,
we have a request. Would it be possible to enlarge the font, sir? Enlarge the font?
Sure. Well, do you have your own font or not? I mean, do you have your own, hold on. You have your own document? Because you can look at that yourself. You don't have to look at the screen. Can you see it better now?
Yes,
or
sir.
open your own document and see if you can read it.
Yes, sir. I got it here. Jasmine is saying.
Okay. All right. So open your own document, and then these are the areas, and these are the questions. I'm going to pull this up for a second. Okay, so these questions are a bit enlarged, so there are 8 questions. So can you answer those 8 questions in relation to each community? And if you can't, then ask me on Tuesday. And you should also know the next thing, the relationship among the existence of sign languages, deaf communities, and deaf cultures. So if you have a sign language, you may or you may not have a deaf community. But if you have a deaf culture, you must have a sign language. So I want you to think back and forth about that. And then the rest, take out the rest of the questions. The rest of the questions would be on the final, not on the midterm. So I'm going to make this bigger.
We'll just do an interpreter switch.
Okay. Okay. So I know you can't see the interpreter that well, so I'm gonna just make this bigger and then stop. Okay. You see it says in terms of deaf culture, don't worry about that question for next week. Given a statement about culture in Philippine deaf and hearing cultures, don't worry about that. That's not going to be on the test next week. And given a statement about deafness and or deaf people, about the models, that's not going to be on the test either. So boom, gone. That will be on the final. So on the areas, I'm going to make it bigger. I don't know how much bigger I can make it. Okay. Can you see it more clearly now? These are the
Yes,
areas.
I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. So, and then the types of questions you need to answer. All right, so again, here are the questions. Okay, and then the final one that you need to discuss. Okay. So I'm going to let you take the PowerPoint for the rest of the period and also during the week before Tuesday, and then we'll discuss these on Tuesday. I want you to try to answer each question. Okay? And then let's see if you have similar answers on Tuesday. And if you do, then you shouldn't have any problem with the test. Okay, but if we see on Tuesday, oh, you're having some problems, I'm going to wait and not give the test on Thursday, okay, because I want you all to do well on the test. Any question about that?
No questions, sir.
Okay, so on Tuesday we'll
Ray
begin.
is raising his hand. Ray
Yes,
is raising his hand.
Who is?
Ray.
Ray, yes, go ahead, Ray.
The three questions. The first, the places. Second, the question. And the third is schools. Is that right?
So I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, I say first, again, I will do it again. First, places. Second, what was that? Sorry.
The
I
eight
missed it.
questions.
The eight questions. And then the third, schools.
School? Are you talking about?
Discussion. Discussion. Let's go. Sorry. Discussion. The third is discussion. Am I right?
Discussion about the test, you mean?
I saw it. It's connected to one. We have the question 1 to 8, and the next it freezes.
So he's asking about the last part,
Last part.
the statement about the existence of sign language.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for the whole area. So you can make a generalization. So if there's a sign language, will there be a deaf community? Maybe, but not necessarily. If there is a sign language, will there be a separate deaf identity? Maybe, but not necessarily. If there's a sign language, will there be a deaf culture? Maybe, not necessarily. So in Manila, yes. In Vietnam, yes. But in Providence Island, no. Sign language, but no deaf culture. So you can go through each of the 9 areas if you want, or you can just make one generalization. So if there is a deaf culture, does there have to be a sign language? What do you think?
Ming saying yes.
Yes. But if there's a sign language, must there be a deaf culture?
Ren saying yes. Patring is nodding his head. Also, Yummy is saying yes.
So if there's a sign language, there must be a deaf culture. You're saying yes. What about Providence Island? Is there a sign language?
Tibbs is nodding his head. Yummy is saying yes.
There's a sign language, but on Providence
Nathaniel saying
Island,
yes.
on Providence Island, there's a sign language, but is there a deaf culture?
No, Nathaniel is saying no.
Right. So if you have a sign language, you don't necessarily have a deaf culture. Providence Island is an example of that. But if you have a deaf culture, like in Manila, you have to have a sign language. Right?
Got it. Yummy said yes. Nathaniel said yes. Ren saying yes.
Right. Okay. So think about this a little. Maybe what I'll let you do is after we finish our discussion today, maybe you can discuss among yourselves and see if you can all come up with the same answers, or if you come up with different answers. You should be able to come up with the same answer. Okay? And then Tuesday, okay, this is what I think we should do. I think you should continue discussing among yourself today and answer each of the 8 questions. So, for example, first question is there a sign language in the area? So ask it about 9 different places, or I think it's 9 different places. So, is there a sign language in, oh, sorry. Providence, on Martha's Vineyard, now we're talking about the past. We're not talking about now, we're talking about the past. Before Thomas Gallaudet set up the school for the deaf. So start with Providence Island.
Yummy, Jasmine, Nathaniel, Tibbs saying yes, and also Ren saying yes.
Yes. Providence Island have a sign language?
Nathaniel saying yes.
Yes.
Everybody's saying yes.
Yes, okay. And go through each place. And you'll find that all the places have a sign language, right? But when we ask about, is there a separate deaf identity? And we ask the question about Providence Island, not a separate identity. Hearing and deaf people share the same identity. But in the United States and in the Philippines, hearing and deaf people have different, deaf people and hearing people have different identities.
Everybody saying yes.
Yes,
They,
okay,
they have separate.
yes. So this is what you need to do. So I think it's better if you all prepare together and make sure you understand. Then on Tuesday, I want you to tell me the answers to all of these questions. And we want to make sure that you're understanding everything about the questions. Okay, so I want you just to go through, like maybe we'll start with Jasmine, and we'll move to Kyla, and then we'll move to Jacques, and then we'll move to Mary Chris, Meng. Like for example, I asked Jasmine, so is there a sign language on Providence Island? Yes or no? And then Jasmine will say yes or no. And then Kyla, what about Rental Island? Is there a sign language or not? And then you have to answer. And then what about Ming, what about Philippines? Is there a sign language in the Philippines? Yes or no? Okay, and Jacques, is there a sign language in Vietnam? Yes or no? Okay, and then ask each of the question about different things. I think you're all making this very difficult, much easier than you think, but maybe you don't see it that way. So anyway, this is why I want you to go through and see if you have any questions by Tuesday. You should all be able to agree on all the answers. Okay, so you should make sure you all agree on all the answers. There are some questions that I could ask that you can't agree on, but all of these questions only have one answer. Okay? All right, I'm going to stop the sharing now so you can see the interpreter better. So let's go back. Okay, so I want you to, this afternoon, I want you to go through each of the questions and I want you to come up with an answer. And then I want you to make sure that you all agree on the answer. Like if one person doesn't agree, then you have to convince them it's right or wrong. Okay, and you should have a clear reason why you choose one answer or another. So, you know, for example, do hearing people sign, many hearing people sign on Providence Island? And you can find that in the notes, and yes, many hearing people sign. The PowerPoint, yeah. Okay, any questions about that?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. All right, now the other question I have is, have all of you or some of you had a chance to look at the Deaf President Now video?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not
Since
yet.
everybody's
Okay.
saying not yet.
Okay. Then I won't say anything more about that until all of you have had a chance to look at it. But I'm curious about your reaction.
Ray is saying I will watch it on Sunday. Honestly, Jasmine, I haven't watched it yet because I work until late night yesterday.
I'm not complaining if you haven't watched it, but I just want to check. Okay, I want everyone to watch it before we discuss it. I don't want to tell you what it's about because you need to experience it for yourself. Now, I mean, I can tell you what it's about, but it's important you experience this because I think this is something, well, Well, it's funny. I showed it to deaf people in Laos who I was training. Okay, and one of the deaf women, she was crying through the whole tape because she was so shocked that deaf people did this. Shocked in a good way, not in a bad way. Okay, so if I just tell you what happened, you go, oh, okay, I know what happened. But you really, this is something you need to experience.
No, Dr. Vidi, we have to wait. You have to wait. We will watch it. That's what
Yeah.
Jasmine is saying.
Yeah. Well, actually, I participated in this, so it's meaningful for me, but maybe meaningful in a different way. But I want to discuss it. Yeah. So Ray's saying true.
Racy,
Yes.
really? Really?
Yes. And I lived not very far from Gallaudet at that time. So I walked over to school. I didn't drive my car because it's easy to walk. So I
Ray
walked over
saying,
to
I'm very
school.
curious. Sorry.
Yeah. Walked over to school and everything was closed. All the gates were locked. There were people standing guard at the gates and they asked me who I was, why I wanted to come in. Did I support deaf president now? And why? So I answered all the questions okay, and I was able to go inside. So anyway, but it's interesting. So, okay, well, give all of you and the interpreters not much work today, although you still have to talk about the questions. Okay, so I want you to take this time to talk about the questions. Okay. So if you want me to stay online, I will, if you want me to answer questions, but I'm gonna step back and let you discuss among yourselves. Okay, so I think we can probably go ahead and let the interpreters stay. We'll pay them for their time. I don't know if I can guarantee that, but hopefully you can. Okay. I mean, because, if we're not really having a formal class, it's not quite the same. But, I think it's important that in case you have questions that we able to discuss this. Rents, you have your hand up?
I think Ren's is a question. 1 to 8 questions. So you will be asking us those 8 questions, right, Mr. Dr. Woody?
Well, yeah, versions of those 8 questions. So I might say, Providence Island has a sign language, A, sign language, B, a deaf culture, C, a sign language and a deaf culture, A and B, or D, no sign language and no deaf culture. And you have to say which one. Okay. So again, does Rennell Island has A, a sign language, B, a deaf culture, C, both A and B, a sign language and a deaf culture, and D, neither a sign language nor a deaf culture. So, which one?
A. Yami is saying A.
Yes, A, it has a sign language. It doesn't have both. Okay, what about Philippines? Philippines has A, the sign language, B, a deaf culture, C, sign language and deaf culture, D, no sign language, no deaf culture.
Meng and Jasmine saying letter C.
C, yes.
Since everybody's saying
Yes.
letter C.
Yes. So If I ask the same question about Vietnam, you give the same answer you gave for the Philippines. If I ask the same question about Thailand, you give the same answer you gave for Philippines. If I ask the same question about Reno Island, then you give the same answer you gave for Providence Island, okay? Very clear. That will be the way, Rance, that will be the way I'll ask the question. Okay? So,
Okay, actually, that will be.
yeah, and then I might say, for example, on the last question about relationship between sign language and deaf culture, I might say, for example, if a language has a deaf culture, it will have A, a deaf community, B, a sign language, C, both a deaf community and a sign language, and D, neither.
Yami's saying C.
C, yes. So if it has a deaf culture, it must have a deaf community, it must have deaf identity, it must have a sign language, yeah.
Jasmine is saying, and Merrick is saying they missed some parts of the questions or the choices.
So Yami, do you want to, you remember the question? You can repeat and explain to them? Because they missed part of the question.
The video, Sir Bai, can we do the refresh rates? Because you keep on freezing. That's what Mary Chris and Jasmine say. Yeah.
Switch interpreter.
Okay. Switch interpreter. Ugh.
So
Time to take a break. Time to take a break, and then we'll come back and let's. Okay, so anyway, let me go again. Yeah, so
Yami saying, yeah, I thought I was going to explain it, and now we're taking a break. What are we
well,
doing?
go ahead and explain it. Yeah, you won't forget. Go ahead and explain. So go ahead, Yami.
So, from what I understood from Bay, sign language uses what? A, it has to have a deaf community. B, deaf community and sign language. C, deaf. So A is deaf community. Community. Okay. B is sign language. It has sign language. C, deaf has a community or culture and sign language, and D, none. None
Yeah,
at all.
let's change it around a little bit. So if a place has a deaf culture.
So, but it's if, right? If the place uses
No.
sign language.
No, because that's a different answer. If they have a deaf culture, will they have A, a sign language,
deaf culture. Okay.
B, a deaf community, C, both a sign language and a deaf community, and D, neither sign language nor deaf community. So C.
And the answer is C.
Yeah. Because with a culture, you have to have a community. With a community, you have to have a culture. But with a sign language, maybe you don't have to have a separate culture. You share the same culture. For example, in Britain, people speak English. In America, people speak English. but they have a different culture. They don't have the same culture. Okay. No, C. C is the answer.
I missed the last line you said, sorry.
I forgot what I
But
said.
they have separate, they both speak the same
Language, but have a
language,
different
but
culture. Okay. So if there is a deaf culture, so the culture is shared. Therefore, the language has to be shared. And therefore, the community has to be shared. Okay? But this is why you need to discuss among yourselves. So you can convince other people. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's take a break, give the interpreter a break, give your eyes a break. And then I'm going to come back, and then I want you to start discussing among yourself. And only if you have a question, like Brent had a question. So then you ask me a question. But I'm not going to test you or ask you questions now. I want you to discuss among yourself. Okay, and then if you don't agree, like one group says one thing and the other group says something else, and you can't work it out, then you can ask. Okay? And I'll stay online and the interpreters will stay online, but we won't do much. Okay, so 10-minute rest, 15-minute rest. Okay, all right.
So Pete is saying, so we'll discuss for an hour. Maybe we'll give the interpreters a break, and so we'll be back at 4. So we'll have, you can come back at 4 probably.
Okay, okay, all right, we can do that. Good.
So we'll just lay out the questions, and then that's when we'll have the chance to ask you any questions if needed.
Yeah, I think Ming has a question now.
Sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, because Meng's screen is frozen. Jasmine is just explaining, okay, right now we're just going to discuss as a group, and then we'll do that activity, and we'll ask questions to Dr. Woody if needed later on when he comes back.
Okay, all right then. So the interpreters and I will come back at 4. Okay, so you have an hour. If you need more time, we can give you more.
Okay, sir. Sounds
okay,
good.
All right.
Okay, Dr. Woody, this is Jasmine speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So with the island nations, there is Martha's Vineyard, Renville,
Renault?
sorry, Renal, and then what was the other ones? I forgot.
Providence Island?
Yes, Providence, and then the other one was
Bangkok, Thailand. KHOR, Thailand, and Adamaro, Ghana.
So Jasmine saying, just to review, Martha's Vineyard, Providence, Renal, and Solomon Island. Those are the island nations.
Mm-hmm.
So they both have hearing and deaf people that can sign, but there's no deaf culture because of that fact.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Then we have Bangkor Village and Adamaro Bay. which are hearing and deaf people that sign, but they also don't have a deaf culture. Am I correct?
Right. I mean, basically those 5 areas are the same. Sign language, hearing people sign, but no deaf culture.
Okay, that's clear, sir.
Okay. Anything else?
Peeps is saying, didn't Ray have a question in our discussion? Ray, didn't you have a question? Yes, right. Sir, I have a question. Last quiz. Altogether was part of the midterm. We got a grade for that. But up until now, we haven't gotten the results. So I'm wondering if you're keeping that until after, or will you tell us what the results are soon?
Well, you mean you got the result already for the midterm before?
Not yet. Nat is saying not yet. Jasmine saying not yet.
Yes, yes. Does anybody remember why I'm giving you a second midterm?
Marvin wants to talk.
Yeah.
Marvin?
Mhm.
We'll just spotlight him. So Dr. Woody, I'm here. And with Ray's comment, we had a quiz and a test that was given together, I believe. So that was the, sorry, it's freezing.
Sure, by Meng is supporting Marvin's. Ano, that's the quiz actually together with the batch 2 of students.
Mhm.
They have the same. They took the exam together.
Mhm. Yes. Do you know what happened to the exam? What I explained?
This is Jasmine.
Mhm.
Cool. So Woody is asking or told us about how he went to World Federation of the Deaf and he sent the test to Miss Techi. But once he arrived in Hawaii, I believe it was Hawaii, they corresponded and Miss Techi said that she didn't get any of the tests. So
Right.
what happened is that they're going to decide that we'll do a review again and then we'll do a test again. And that's why now we're going to open the discussion to all the topics because we want to make sure that we know all the content before we take the test again. So we want to make sure we understand the islands, the countries, the signs, whether or not they use sign, the deaf identity. We want to make sure that is all understood by that. So Tuesday, we'll have a quiz just to make sure that we understand everything. And then we'll have that test later on. But didn't you remember that Woody
You know, Teshi never got the midterm grades. It's as much my fault as hers. I don't think it's her fault at all. But I don't know what happened to the tests. I did not keep a record. I just graded the tests and sent them back. But they didn't arrive. So we have no midterm grades for you. We have 2 quizzes that you took before, and we have the 2 quizzes, but we don't have a midterm grade. So this is why I'm giving you the test on next week on Thursday, so you can finish the course. And as Jasmine said, I'm trying to make sure that you get good grades and you understand everything before you take the test, because, you know, you shouldn't really need to take the test again. So I'm hoping that you'll do better on this test than you did on the previous test, but I don't have any record of the previous test. Okay, so that's the midterm. Put that to the side. Now, final. The final project, you gave me different things. Some were very good, some were okay, some were not so good. And if I grade the projects that you gave me, you may not get a very high, some of you may not get a very high grade. So I talked with Teshi about not using the grade for the final projects, but giving you another test, which we will also discuss in great detail. And this will give you all a much better chance of getting a better grade. So I'm sorry, you know, that there's a problem with the midterm. And you should bawl me out. But with the final, I think it's better that you take the test and me not grade the projects. Now, I will go through each project with you. And I'll take the name off the project and we'll go through each project. So you will eventually understand where mistakes may be. Okay. But, you know, the most important thing is that the midterm will be on the first part of the course, and then the final will be first and last part of the course. So I don't know, Marvin, if that, and Ray, if that answered your questions.
Yes, sir. It's clear, Ray saying it's clear.
Yeah, and I do apologize for the problem with the midterm. It's first time in 50 years it's happened, so. Anyway, but, you know, can't change what happened, okay. It looks like Yami is enjoying her food.
I'm
Tastes
hungry,
good.
sir. I'm
Yes,
hungry, sir.
Okay. So, okay, so does that explain more about the test? Okay, any other questions you have you want to talk about now? So as Jasmine said, there's a sign language, but no deaf culture in the 5 small communities.
So wait. Let's go to Meng.
Yeah.
Meng's just saying this is a different issue. Sorry, I was just talking. It was just between me and Jasmine. But
Okay.
Jasmine said, I just talked to Dr. Woody about it. It's about culture and versus language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else that we had to talk about? And Meng saying, oh, right.
Okay.
And Shak saying, you know, when we were talking about this, everybody was like, I don't know. So we wanted to make sure we knew about the culture.
Right.
Just based
Right.
on your
Right.
facial expressions. I didn't know if people were understanding.
Yeah. So on Tuesday, I will ask you some questions randomly, and they'll be the same as what you'll get on the test on Thursday. And then if you answer well, then everything's fine. And if you answer not well, then maybe we need to have more review. So we'll see.
Okay. Thursday, right, sir? Racing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tuesday, try to watch the video before Tuesday also about deaf president now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Copy, sir. That will be
Okay.
fine, sir.
All right. So that's it.